Right, welcome to part two of what it's like to ride a 1937 Brough Superior. And I'm in the workshop today because it's raining outside, and so I'm in here. And I thought I would answer the two most common questions people ask me when I'm out and riding it and stop. And I guess if I was a really switched on YouTuber, I would mention it now and then make you hang on to the end, but that tends to annoy me, so I'll just tell you now. So the most common question I get asked is, how have I got this Brough Superior to ride around for a couple of months? And the answer is simply, I'm a member of the Brough Superior Club, and they got given this bike quite a few years ago by Mr. Tate, its longest standing owner, and the club refurbished it, and then they decided they'd lend it to club members. So I'm a member of the club. I've been a member for quite a long time. I don't have a Brough myself, but I like them. And they don't look down on you because you don't have one. It's a very friendly, old-fashioned, gentlemanly club, and many of the people have had these bikes for decades. You know, some longer than I've been alive, people have had them. And they bought them just because they liked them, not because of their value. Indeed, many of them bought them for like 20, 30 quid when nobody else wanted them. So it's a club of true enthusiasts. It's a really nice group of people. And so if you remember, and you'd like to borrow it, there's a bit of a queue to get it, but you ask to borrow it, and there's a bit of a vetting process to see if you're the right sort of person to look after it, because it's quite a responsibility because of its rarity and value. And there's a kind of deposit you have to pay, which is fair enough considering its value, and then you pay, I think it's about £250 a month for the privilege of riding, which covers insurance and running costs and all sorts of stuff like that. And then it's yours for a couple of months, and the only real restriction is you ride it no more than 1,500 miles in 2 months, which is fine. I'll be probably getting a bit close to that. And the other thing is ride it and enjoy it and take it places and let people see it, because many people have never seen a Brough Superior running before, and it's quite a treat for most people. It certainly has been for me when I've seen them out and about, which is quite a rare sight. So that's how I've got it. And if you wanted to borrow it, then join the Brough Club, maybe be a member for a couple of years and then apply. And if you're the right sort of person that will look after it, then you've got a fair chance of having a Brough for a couple of months. It's quite a thing. It's quite a responsibility, and a fantastic thing to ride as well. So second question I get asked by everybody is, how much is it worth? Because people see headline figures of SS100s selling for £300,000-400,000 or whatever. This is an SS80, so it's a fair bit cheaper. There were more of them made, and it's probably worth somewhere between £65,000 and maybe even £80,000, depending on mileage and history and everything else. But it's an expensive bike. When it was new, it was probably about the price of a cottage, so it's probably holding its value, and you can see £250 a month to cover insurance and things is very good value. So there's the first two things. What's it worth and how have I got it? And if you like this kind of stuff, then if you click like on these videos, then it helps other people get shown it, so more people can enjoy this film as well. And the other thing, if you like these and you want to see all the videos that follow about this and other ancient mechanical wonders, then click subscribe and you'll get told when the next video comes up. So a couple of things I wanted to show you while we're in the workshop is the gear change. So it's got a Norton doll's head gearbox, and it's called a doll's head because this bit looks a bit like a doll's head. And sometimes when I'm out, I don't quite get the gear, and that's my fault. But let me just show you. So you've got a fairly long foot change, and that pivots this piece in the middle. And then if you look behind here, this mechanism, if I point at it, there we go, and the linkage goes to there, and there's a little bit of kind of movement in there as well, and then that goes down there, and there's another bit of movement. Difficult to show, I'm juggling a torch and a phone. I'll probably get more professional at this one. I've done a few more of these, but so forgive me for that. But there you go, down there. So there's a fair few linkages between my foot changing gear and it actually changing gear. So I'm sure if I rode it a lot more, I'd get very familiar with it. I wouldn't occasionally miss a gear. So, and indeed it's nearly 90 years old, so there is going to be around a little bit of wear and tear on it. So it's 1000cc or just under, side valve, V-twin. It's quite low compression. It's very easy to kick over. I'm quite a big bloke, but even for me, it's a little pussycat to kick over really. It's got a decompressor, but you don't really need to use it. It tends to start first kick when it's cold and first kick when it's hot, and then when it's in the middle, sometimes you need to tickle the carb a little bit and sometimes you don't. So, and again, if you owned it and it was yours, you'd kind of know that pretty quickly, but it takes you a few hundred miles probably to get the hang of it. So the only other thing I wanted to point out, which I mentioned in one of the films I'm doing, is if you look at the footrest, there's like a metal lip on the end. It's like a stirrup, and it is, when you're riding it quickly on bumpy roads, the intention is you jam your foot into the stirrup like riding a horse, and then you brace your knees or thighs on that and you grip the bike. And I think that's a really intelligent way of holding onto a bike, because if you're just basically sitting on this beautiful big seat and you brake or do anything, then you're putting your weight on the handlebars, and that changes the geometry and the weight of the bike and changes the handling. So, and if you notice the shiny cylinder head gaskets here, some people are bound to spot them. Not this film, but the next one, there is some misbehaviour, and I do have to take the heads off. It is an old bike, so and it has done nearly 30,000 miles since the last time there were heads off. And I was doing a fairly epic ride on it. I was riding it sort of 230 odd miles down to Dorset and back. And this will be in not this video, but a future one. And I went down to see a guy who owns a 1925 SS100, which is believed to be Lawrence of Arabia's first SS100. So quite a piece of history. And we went for a ride on it, and we went over to Clouds Hill, which is Lawrence's house, where he used to keep his Broughs. And then after that we ride over to where Lawrence is buried, and on previous occasions that elderly SS100 has been parked up alongside his grave and dripped oil alongside him like a faithful hound visiting his master. So anyway, that's not for this video, that's for the one after this, but it's quite an epic video. Not only do you go for a ride with probably Lawrence of Arabia's SS100, the guy who owns it, I mean, it's a very valuable bike, and it's, it's 100 years old almost, but he doesn't hang back. It's quite a good brisk scamper down some country roads. It's definitely worth watching on the next film. So anyway, I thought the best way to tell you all the rest of what it's like to ride is not for me to sit here and talk to you, but stick a camera on my helmet and go for a ride, and then you can hear the bike, see the countryside, and I'll tell you what it's actually like to ride. So let's get togged up and go for a ride. I'll tell you what about it. Home 400 miles. So what are my thoughts and experiences on my first 400 miles of broughing? Well, when I picked it up, I had to ride it home 100 miles. Yes, I know that's a great hardship. And for most of that journey, it poured with rain on me. And I had to ride the first 50 miles on unfamiliar roads in pouring rain. I did wonder whether it would keep going, but it kept going absolutely beautifully, not a tiniest hitch or gremlin. And unfortunately, the time I picked it up meant I was immersed in Friday afternoon rush hour traffic, and some of it was pretty grim, but the Brough just kept on rolling. I even had time to add to a poem that I learned at school when I was stuck in Slough. And if you've ever been to Slough, there's not a great deal to say for it, but I would say it is one of the most beautiful smelling places in the world. If you're not thinking of having a curry when you go there, you'll definitely be thinking of having a curry when you leave. I'll put the poem up on screen. I added the last two lines to it, as I think the poem was written in the same year as the Brough was born. I think it's a little bit unfair and needs the update, which is my two final lines. So anyway, so I rode it home in 100 miles of pouring rain, and it was flawless. And so later I took it out when it was dry, and went for a ride, like 40 odd miles, and again it was flawless, apart from user error. I was coming down Goodwood Hill, and there was a McLaren supercar in front of me, all popping and banging, as they do. The Brough doesn't do that sort of modern shenanigans, although it did almost at the bottom. when it coughed and spluttered a couple of times and then stopped. And normally this ticks over like a metronome, but when I looked I'd run out of petrol, and you just basically slide the reserve tap on and off I went, so that was good. The next ride I went on, there were a couple of little rides, but the next one I went over towards the New Forest, sort of 140 odd miles. It was very nice. And next ride I went on after that was I rode over into Hampshire, and some of the nice roads there. There's a very nice road, and I'll put the details of it at the bottom. It's probably one of the most beautiful rides in Hampshire. Starting, handling, brakes, all very good. So reliability. So I'd taken it to, there's a bike club meeting at Hayling Island down on the south coast. And I took it there, and it behaved itself all the way there, and lots of people were quite keen to see it, as most people had never seen a running Brough before, so lots of questions about it. And I was riding it home, and there was a clank from underneath. And watch out for big potholes when you've got no rear suspension. And there's a clank from underneath, and when I looked, the stand had come off, the spring rather had come off the stand, and the stand was scratching along the road. So I pulled into a petrol station and had a quick look. Couldn't find anything to hand to fix it, so I found some metal that was kind of part of a display outside the petrol station, and using a Leatherman's pliers thing I repurposed it into a spring puller. But trying to pull springs on their length is difficult, and I could only get it to about ½ inch, a centimetre of where it needed to be. I couldn't quite do it. So remembering a couple of things my dad had told me, my dad was an aero engineer, you can put coins in a spring, so you bend the spring from side to side, which is generally easy, and then you poke coins in the gap, and you do that kind of as opposites, and eventually pushes the eyes of the spring apart, and you can fit it much more easily. So I thought I'd go in and see what was in the petrol station, but first thing I thought, cable ties, zip ties, whatever you call them, that's going to be the easiest thing, just to tie it up out of the way. So anyway, I went into the petrol station, and the lad behind the counter, he looked about 12 years old in fairness to him, and I said, "Have you got any cable ties?" And he looked at me a little quizzically and said, "We're a petrol station, we don't sell clothes or ties." So that was kind of that, and as I started to head off into a two Ronnie's 4-candle sketch, and then I asked him, thinking of the coins trick, I said, "Do you have any 2p's?" And he again looked at me oddly and said, "Well, we've only got a staff toilet." So I kind of abandoned things at that point, before we did get into a two Ronnie sketch, but he obviously thought I was some sort of dangerous eccentric lunatic. And not helped by, as I was leaving, I said to him, "Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to climb in your dustbin and have a look for something." And that was the last kind of surprised, raised eyebrow look I had from him. And that's what I did. I had a rummage around in the bins, found some nice thin wire, a bit too thin as it turned out, to wire the stand up. But it didn't get me very far, and unfortunately this wire broke. But literally as it broke, I was passing some tree surgeons, and I know a few friends of tree surgeons. They tend to be very pragmatic, friendly blokes. So I pulled over and asked if they had any cable ties, and they let me have a rummage in their truck. And they gave me a packet of cable ties, and I just cable tied the stand up, and that was that, and that got me home. Right, first cable tie I put on, it was too piddly, but stopped at the side of the road and found these guys. Very helpful if you need a tree cutting down. Right. Yeah, thank you. These are the people. Right, let's get back on the road. Only 2 breakdowns in a mile. It's going really well. And then I fixed it. So I couldn't, when I got home, I couldn't find any big fat washers. But we'd moved house recently, so I found a big old box of pennies, which are the same kind of thing. I got a bit distracted looking at all the dates on these old pennies, because many of them are well over 100 years. Just kind of wondering what lives they've been through. Some of them are like pre-World War One, so people would have used them throughout the war, or maybe the coins actually went to war. Anyway, I got distracted, as you do sometimes, and eventually there's a little segment I'll add in just showing you how you do it if you've never had to do a spring before. This is absolutely the easiest way to do it. You don't need to use old pennies though. You just can use washers or whatever you've got, but you need to use quite a few of them though. So trying to stretch a spring out by pulling it from end to end, when you look at the size of this spring, is near impossible unless you're some sort of Herculean monster. But all you do is you bend the spring, hold the spring firmly at one end, and then bend it from side to side, and as the coils open up, you jam in coins or washers, and then put them in. And then eventually, as you can see, this sits between the coils and effectively lengthens the spring. So I couldn't film putting it on one-handed, but you can see it stretches the spring out far enough that it goes over the ends. I looked at a picture of the original bike, and the closed spring on the left and the open spring is that way up on the right, and it all fits together. And then when I cut the cable ties off and put the centre stand on, the spring should stretch out, and either the pennies will fall out or I can just wiggle them out with some pliers. And there you go, that's how you fit a spring. So if we put it into top gear, I don't know what the revs are because it doesn't have a rev counter, but we're probably not doing much more than 1500 RPM, and that's just chugging along. It's chugging along a bit briskly because we're coming into a 30. So the Speedo kind of is fairly accurate. Let's put it into third. And I've checked it against the GPS, it overreads by about 10% or so. So it's not dissimilar to a modern vehicle. Give it the beans in top. That's a little junction. So I should find a little straight bit of road to give it a run. Generally I'm just enjoying riding it. It's kind of such a nice pace and such a nice riding position, and it's so comfortable. I just want to kind of go along and enjoy things, really. Because if I'm on a fast bike, you're always kind of chasing that vanishing point. It just leads to you going quicker and quicker. Sometimes I forget this thing's got another gear. There we go. You kind of get, I guess, kind of mentally programmed by the bikes you're most familiar with riding by listening to the revs. So I got my first V-twin motorbike at Ducati when I was 17, and whilst it had a rev counter, you didn't really look at the rev counter because you weren't revving it out. You were riding the mid-range, the kind of grunt of the engine. I think there was even a period with Ducatis when I started riding them, it was kind of almost considered ungentlemanly conduct if you revved the thing out unless you were on a racetrack. Probably got some of that still left in me, actually. I think when I've had fast bikes, I kind of consider it slightly cruel if you rev the thing out. Some of the modern, like 200 horsepower superbikes I've ridden, you've got to really wring them out. Just like almost kind of wince when I do it. Alright, so I'm not braking so much because of the handling of the bike. I'm braking because I don't know what's around the corner, and there's an entrance to a house. If you're on something modern with disc brakes and ABS, you can probably stop. But this is going to take a bit longer to get down. So I thought I'd just ride to the end of this road. It's all very picturesque England. We're in Hampshire, kind of Sussex borders. And I'll turn around and head home. Right, is he looking? You never know. Probably should be nattering away all the bloody time, shouldn't I? Some of the YouTube channels I watch, someone's just talking continually. Sometimes you wish they'd shut up, so maybe I've got some of that in my mind. You see that as you're kind of chugging up a hill, if you just go from full advance back a little bit, it just gets a lovely kind of chug to it. Very nice. Right, let's just turn it around here. I'll treat you to the road in the other direction, which is obviously completely and utterly different in the other direction. So that was all very pleasant. So it does friendly Nord as traditional in England. It does about 50 to the gallon. It's got a 4-gallon tank, but I've discovered you can't fill it up to the top, otherwise the petrol kind of sloshes out the caps. And I guess it's been doing that for a while because it's been attacking the paint. So I only tend to put 2 or 3 gallons in it, but that's more than enough for 100 miles between fuel stops. I check the oil every time before I ride it. It doesn't seem to use oil. It's not smoky when I ride it along. Also a little bit of oil's coming out of it when it's parked up. So I've checked it a few times in 400 and I haven't needed to put any in. So it's quite nice. So the brakes, not on this road, but on a kind of a flat road somewhere. I'll give you a demonstration of what the stopping power is like of a 1937 Brough Superior. I guess most people wonder what's the braking like on a really old motorbike, and it's obviously not the same as your modern ABS equipped beasts. Slow right down now. Well, it's a tractor with a trailer. We are going to slow right down. Is going slow. Quite short. First gear is quite short, so it's really only pulling away, and you probably don't even really need that. Now back up to roughing speeds. Where was I? Oh, brakes. Yeah, they're all right actually. The back brake's quite powerful. It's got a nice and progressive feel to it. You can probably definitely lock it up if you needed to. Front brake is less powerful. You probably could lock up the front brake, but when these things were new, a lot of the roads were kind of gravel and dirt, and people didn't really want a powerful brake, so that's probably why it is like it is. Gear change, so it's 4-speed. You can change it with your foot, and the gearbox is a Norton Doll's head, which perhaps I'll show you in another section where I kind of walk around the bike and show you what's what. It's just called that because there's a big kind of doll-shaped head lump at the top of the gearbox. All the gears are in there. Occasionally it might take a little bit of a wiggle to find them, but that's probably me as much as the gearbox. There we go, that's very picturesque. Kind of instinctively go for the front brakes, I'm used to modern bikes. Coming down into South Harting. Let's not overhate the brakes, we'll let the engine rumble us along. Handling is very nice. It's quite a long wheelbase. The head angle is quite relaxed, I think you would say in modern parlance. I don't know why I'm using the front brake. I'm just instinctively using the front brake when the back brake's more than up to slow you down on these hills. This road I've just ridden along, by the way, is one of the few left in the county that doesn't have speed cameras all over it, but I probably shouldn't tell you that, otherwise it will be infested with you lot going very fast. Hello. Road closed. The road's closed, there's traffic coming, so maybe it's not closed. So, brakes, handling, starts pretty much always first kick. It's just under 1,000cc V-twin, but it's very low compression, so it's not like you see people trying to start gold starts where they're like leaping on the Kickstarter, hoping it doesn't kill them. Let's go and see whether the road really is closed. That definitely looks closed, doesn't it? There's a little snicket where you can go around. So how does this compare to a modern bike? That might be a question someone might ask. And, well, I'll probably best compare it to my Buell. It's a 2003 Buell, so it's a 1000cc air-cooled V-twin. It's obviously 66 years newer. But kind of the principles are the same. So I guess the things that really stand out as a difference is the comfort, and not the comfort in the way you might think. So the Buell's a fairly sporting bike, so it's fairly firm springs and damping rates and everything. Handles really beautifully, actually. It's one of those bikes that in a few years' time people say, God, I should have bought one of those when they were cheap. They're fantastic, but maybe that's a story for another day. But the Buell is got a firm seat, and on roads like this you kind of get jiggled and battered and bounced over all these bumps, whereas on this it just kind of irons them out. And I kind of noticed after a while of riding it, when I'm on the modern stuff, generally with firm suspension, you're not thinking in too good a regard to the people responsible for the state of the roads. But riding this, I haven't really had that thought. I mean, you have to watch out for the big potholes, but generally this thing just glides over the top of them, which I think is remarkable for its age, but it has no rear suspension. It's a rigid rear end. And the first time I rode this bike, and I have borrowed it before about 10 years ago, I thought that was going to be a disaster, coming out like a bike with no suspension. I thought you'd just kind of get battered, basically, and you'd end up limping off the bike and needing a chiropractor. And that's not the case at all. The rear suspension consists of a tyre that runs at about 20 psi. It's got a reasonably thick sidewall, and that obviously absorbs some of it. But the main thing that makes it so comfortable is the saddle. I mean, I'll show you it in another angle, but interesting. Is the saddle. So it's kind of as wide as my butt, so it's like sitting on a really comfy chair, and it's spring loaded, and you'd think, oh, you just kind of wobble all over the place, but no, the spring rates are really well considered, and again, well considered 90 years ago when this was a kind of a key common normal thing. So it makes it incredibly comfortable to go along at sort of 50 miles an hour or whatever speed allows down little bumpy roads like this. You don't really notice it. On the fast stuff you get jiggled and shaken about, so I kind of think maybe I've got generally a positive view on everything. Maybe that's good for you, like kind of vibrating seats in high-end cars. Maybe it's good that your insides are being juggled, but maybe not. But this is certainly much more relaxing. And if I was going to go for 1,000-mile ride down small country lanes that were empty, or nearly empty, I think this would be more uncomfortable than pretty much anything else I've ridden in the last few years. I know that sounds daft because it's like 90 years old and I've ridden all sorts of the latest wonders, but you have to take my word for it. It just is. And I'm as surprised as you are, but it is just really comfortable. The riding position, so I'm not quite sure how much of my riding position you can see with the camera angle, but I'm kind of sitting not quite bolt upright, leaning forward a little bit. So if you were looking at it, you'd think, so I'm sitting in a comfy chair, but I'm not kind of slouching to the extent that an elderly aunt might give me a hard time for slouching. Imagine you're sitting in a kind of fairly comfortable chair, leaning perhaps slightly forward because you've got to a really good bit rather in a book. That's the kind of the riding position. It's not a very scientific description of a riding position, but hopefully that makes sense to you. Right. So probably most of the roads when this thing were new were probably a bit like this. Relatively small. This will probably be a really good condition one in terms of its road surface. I don't think it was really until the Second World War that most of the roads in England and the rest of Britain were tarmacked. Before that, many of them were rolled dirt, which by the time horse and carts and everything else have carved it up, made it a bit iffy. And quite a lot of the towns and cities, to make the road services last longer, oops, there we go, I was saying about the gearbox occasionally. Quite a lot of the towns and cities, their road surfaces weren't tarmac because they wore out too quickly. Many of them were like kind of medieval, so some of them were cobbles. So imagine cobbles, polished round stones, covered in vast tonnages of horse waste, which is slippery at the best of times. And then some city centres, like Winchester, they used wooden blocks. So imagine wooden blocks, polished smooth, covered in horse muck. This is slippery stuff. So, okay, right. There's a little bit of hesitancy there. We've got a block jet, and maybe it's just digesting some petrol he doesn't like. Like, well, the road's a bit bumpy, and in period all the roads would have been a bit bumpy. This bike has got a feature, kind of a combined feature, very well thought through feature, that enables you to hang on. So I used to teach advanced high-speed riding, and many people had never really thought of gripping their bike with their knees, but that is the key thing, because it then takes loading off your arms. Sorry, I go off at a tangent, but back to Brough. So what I was talking about is to enable you to grip the bike so you don't get thrown out of the seat. The end of the foot pegs have got metal plates on, like stirrups, so you can basically put your foot in them, jam your foot against the edges, and then jam your knees or thighs I do like this little bit of road, but it's been raining yesterday and you can get a load of gravel washout. Indeed, there is some of the gravel left over. The tree roots go under the road, you get quite sharp bumps. So what was I wittering on about? Oh, I know, I was wittering on about stirrups. So yeah, I think it's quite a clever idea actually. So you can really brace your feet in the footrests. There's a few large bumps around here. So you can brace your feet in the footrest, brace your knees or thighs against the tank, and that kind of then locks you to the bike. So that if you were to brake hard, you're not having your body thrown forward and changing the whole handling dynamics of the bike. So I think that's quite clever. We're doing indicated 60 uphill with almost no throttle. Right, this road crosses over South Downs Way, and so, well, some people love blasting along here. I find it best to go quite gently. Sometimes you get cyclists who are more intent on breaking a record than being alive. Be keeping up with him. Oh, you never know, it might be. Be quite embarrassing for him if I did catch him. Oh well, he's gone. I don't know if you felt that, I just rolled the timing back a little bit. the engine picked up a bit. The village shop and tea room. I think a Brough would just be drawn into a tea room. So if you're on a modern bike, I just enjoyed going up that hill on an old bike, but if you're on a modern bike, in the south of England there are precious few little twisty hill climb sections for you to try and get your knee down or scrape your foot pegs or something. And I think that's a generational thing. When I started riding, the thing to do was to try and get the underside of your bike down on the road. That was an indication if you were using it to the full. Get your pegs down, or a stand or something would touch down. That was kind of a thing to do in the 80s and probably into the 90s. And then knee sliders started to appear, and then the kind of cool thing was trying to get your knee down. I see many people when I've been teaching riding or when I've just been out for a ride that are climbing off the bike to an enormous degree to try and get their knee down, and the bike's nowhere near its limits. It kind of amuses me, kind of reflecting back to my early days of biking. I think it used to be called ear holing, when you'd be riding along and trying to get some part of your bike down. See, that's a bit bumpy. But again, nothing that kind of stopped me still tootling along at sort of 50 odd. So in future episodes, assuming you want to see future episodes and actually tune in, I take this to a track day for bikes that are 100 years old, and there's some really beautiful old race bikes that the owners are taking out and giving a good seeing to. I'll take this on track, but just for a very gentle bimble, really. Introduce its kind of competition debut at the age of 87. There's an absolutely cracking pub down there. It's a little place called Hooksway. That's as it sounds, Hooksway. I'll put a link in the page. There's a pub down there run by Dave. It's called the Royal Oak, and that is an absolute cracking country pub. Although if you're going, you really need someone to drive you there, because some of his ales are very, very lively indeed. I think the pub didn't get electricity until like the 70s. It's that kind of pub. Get busy in the summer with all the ramblers and mountain bikers going by. But, it is a proper country pub. And I've lived, for the last few years, I've been close enough to walk to it or mountain bike to it. Strong smell of lavender, very nice. See the handling of this, it handles pretty quickly. You can see, you can swerve around obstacles in the road and the potholes the county councils are so fond of putting in for us now. See, we're going along at a good canter. This is the road you want to try, old Winchester Hill. There's a lot of gravel there. Because jeans, like all armour jeans, are kind designed to protect you from the heat when you slide down the road. So, anyway, enough of all that. I will shut up and let you enjoy this. And I will say where it is in case you want to go and ride it. If you're on a super fast bike with clip-ons, then this is probably a bit too small for you, this lane. But if you're on an adventure bike or a normal sit-up bike, then you'll like this. It's normally deserted. Maybe the odd cyclist, occasional horse. No, I've told you it's one of the best roads in Hampshire. Just hang on, we're getting there. Yeah, we just let it chug. Look at those views. The trees have really had a lot of growth this year. Been quite wet. But maybe you can... There we go. Maybe you have to pause it, but it's a beautiful, beautiful view. Sheep in there. If you're going to be a sheep, that's a fine place to be. There's gear in there somewhere. Just occasionally, it can only be me because there's something like a random going on in a gearbox. It's user error. Sometimes there's a man here in a little van selling coffee. And there's the sheep. Their views are the same. Well, not obviously quite the same, but somewhat beautiful the other way. Very nice smells wafting out from the woodland in the shade. You can see it's a little bit bumpy, hence you'd enjoy it on a normal bike or an adventure bike. You probably wouldn't enjoy it so much on your RRRR. you'll have to ride it to fully appreciate all the views. But there you go, that's not a bad view, is it? Yeah, I'm not going fast, I'm only doing 40. Just taking in the scenery. There's nobody else here. Little lanes are nice to explore. There's some really good mountain biking around here as well. Last time I was up here, I pulled over just to take in the view, really. And a couple of guys on Harleys pulled over to see if I was alright, which is very nice. It's a great camaraderie amongst motorcyclists, certainly in Britain. I think in some other countries it's not there, unfortunately, but certainly here. Anyway, so obviously the cheek that they would think a Brough had broken down, but they have a nice kind of talkative blokes. They're Harleys, I don't know what they were, they're sort of modern ones, but with giant tyres and huge exhaust pipes, and they're all dressed up like Hell's Angels crossed with Mad Max. They weren't angels, but they were that kind of thing. There's that whole thing going on where everyone dresses up now to ride motorbikes. Anyway, I was chatting to them, telling them that the earliest Broughs used Harley forks. That seemed to be interesting to them. And after a few minutes boring them or educating, whichever way it would be, one of them said, "We need to go, the show's starting soon." So I thought they'd be like off to a bike show, so I was kind of, "Oh, what's that? Where's that?" But no, they're not off to a bike show. They're inevitable matte black helmets, got audio and radio and stuff inside them, and they were off to listen to Gardener's Question Time whilst riding along. I know, you just wouldn't think it, would you? Some sort of rafty-tufty Hell's Angel listening to that, which, if you don't know it, it's like the kind of a quintessential piece of English culture. It's like a 75-year-old show where I imagine all those lovely gentle souls that enjoy gardening listen in to hear all the latest wonders and all the old recipes for getting rid of all sorts of troubles. So the next time you see a gang of scary-looking angel types scorching along the countryside, they're not angry because of life or unfairness. They're probably just concerned that some snails are going to be at their lettuces while they're out. That's probably why they're going so quickly, so they can get home and deal with them. So they were kind of covered in patches, their jacket, as is the way I think when you're in that kind of world. So all the patches are about Satan and depravity and all of that kind of malarkey. But I'm sure amongst those badges, did I see just for a moment a gardening merit badge? Okay, I think I may have done. There you go. Now that's another. We're in close to Petersfield. Most people just hoon along the A272 and miss out on this. If you like a view, and I think it's deeply ingrained in us that we like a view, isn't it? So I used to come out here on supermoto bikes. Had a Husarbergen Husqvarna. And, yeah. That's Butser Hill. We're going to go up to the top of Butser Hill. Really nice little road goes up to the top of Brough Hill. After the Harley boys departed, and there's a kind of a waft of marijuana about them, as is often the way, but everyone's riding bikes, so it's all good. I kind of set off, in fact, probably along these same roads. I was contemplating life, and in the back of my memory, I read an article a long time ago, that the best way to have creative thoughts, to come up with completely new ideas, is when you mingle diametrically opposed things together. So, riding big, fast, powerful motorbikes and listening to Garda's Question Time would do it. So, maybe those two Harley lads are just great authors in waiting. Certainly a good way to do it, isn't it? These farms along here are active, so I tend to quite slowly. Sometimes animals out. And if you carry on straight along this road, you come into the other little Meon village, which is equally picturesque. Couple of pubs, and you can ride the road the other way. In fact, probably the views are nicer the other way, so I'm not going to show it to you. You have to go and see it for yourself. So you can see you're not going to enjoy this road on a super bike. Anything that doesn't have clip-ons, a nice little road to go down, and it just gets nicer. Just watching out for gravel and bumps. Although gravel's often a kind of a target fixation thing, isn't it? We probably panic too much about gravel. And you'll just ride straight over the top of it, unless you kind of got your bike cranked over. Right, and then you take this little road. Do not drive on the grass. Okay, not going to do that. If you're not from the UK, there's thousands of miles of roads like this. They are tarmacked, but it just builds up in the middle because there's so little traffic. Probably the only people that come along here are the people that live on it, and maybe me. Now when we start climbing up that hill towards Brough Hill, there's often birds of prey riding on the thermals, so I'm not quite sure whether we'll see any, but whether this camera is capable of catching them. Imagine when this Brough was new, that most of the roads it travelled on were probably like this, more gravel than tarmac. Right, there's a farm here, so slow right up. In fairness to the farmer, he wouldn't be expecting any traffic if he was to come out of there in his tractor. spot, isn't it, to live? He's keen on cutting his hedges. This has got a really picturesque name. It's like Harvest Lane or something like that, or Haymaker's Lane. I'll put a link where it is. Just when I said there's no traffic. See, it just chugs up here. Great for sledging. Kamikaze sledging, actually. So, yeah, maybe it'll be great for sledging once. An epic YouTube video followed by potential death. So maybe it's not good for sledging, I'll take that back. Here we are. As you can see by the skyline, we are at the top. Almost at the top. So that is near the top of Brough Hill, and yep, that is the sea. But there's more nice stuff to do. I'll give you some sun. There's normally quite a lot of gravel here. Anyway, if you're on a super motorbike, that used to be quite entertaining. I'm not on a super motorbike. I don't think you can slide the Brough. Well, I can't slide the Brough anyway. So stay with me if you want. So we're going down now, so the views aren't as epic. We are going to go down what I think is my favourite little tiddly lane. It's only a little short bit of it, but it's, to me anyway, and beauty is in the eye of the beholder and all that. To me, it's one of the most beautiful little bits that I've ever ridden anywhere in the world. I've ridden bikes in quite a lot of places. Or if you're an impatient sort of person with the attention span of a wasp, then start skipping ahead. But you might go past it because it's only maybe a minute's riding of it. I love this dappley stuff. you're watching this from outside the UK, and maybe you don't have countryside like this, then what I suggest you do is, if you're ever coming to the UK, then, well, please subscribe and put a comment in. If I don't see it, which I normally reply to every comment, I can give you some pointers about roads you definitely want to ride, and routes you definitely want to take, and where you definitely don't want to go, because the roads are grim. I have to kind of keep thinking about the language I use here, because when you submit a video to YouTube, it asks you if there's any kind of foul language, and I guess if there is, then it probably curtails who gets to see it. So I say it's not for kids, because, well, I'm sure there are some kids that would like to see this, not very many probably. Right, so Butts at Ancient Hill Farm. If you like history, and I guess if you like old motorbikes, it's likely you do, you should visit that. As the name implies, it's an ancient Iron Age kind of village recreated, and with kind of sometimes people living in it as they would have done, you know, a couple of thousand years ago. It's quite interesting. Quite atmospheric. Probably either want to visit on a sunny day or for the full experience, probably on a cold day. And there's like log fires and things burning, and the whole place smells a bit. So I'm not at my favourite bit yet. We've got, I don't know, a few more minutes to go before we get there. I'll tell you, don't worry. I'm filming this in the middle of August. Some of the fields have got combines running in them. There we go. There's one that's obviously been through recently. I spent some of my childhood growing up on farms that my family had. Very happy memories. Yeah, there's a warning sign to any motorcyclist. Watch out for tractors. Getting there now. There's nobody behind me, but and if you have come this far on your adventure bike and you're feeling a bit adventurous, if you just keep an eye to the left, I seem to recall that's a legal right of way, a green lane, or a RUP, road used as a public path. I mean, it certainly used to be anyway. God, I keep going for the front brake. It's kind of ingrained into me. Whereas the back brake, More gentle engine braking is a much better way to go with these old machines. We're nearly at the start of my little lane. In fact, here it is here. The first bit of it is just normal. In fact, this is normally a gravel-covered hell. And I've got a very low undercarriage on this old lady of a Brough. Which does prompt a question. Have you given your motorbike a name? So, Lawrence of Arabia, I've mentioned him before, hopefully you all know who he was. He called his bikes George the First all the way through to George the Seventh. Not formal, but a formal time probably. I think he also had some nicknames for them as well. If you haven't given your bike a name, it's probably because you don't really like it. You're not really emotionally attached to it. Maybe, or maybe you're just not that sort of person. So I'm on my favourite little lane, but the favourite little bit is quite short. And I'll show you what I mean when we get there. Keep the wind noise down, I've got to ride along with my helmet closed. There's a microphone in my helmet with one of those fairy Dougal things on it. If I open my visor a bit, wind noise goes up. I'd quite like to open my visor because it's warm. So there we go. See, still going for the front brake after all the miles on this. Still not at my favourite bit yet. Nearly there. Maybe I've built it up too much. I really like it. I often come back this way from wherever I've been, just so I can go down it. There's never any traffic, sometimes just stop for a moment. Having said there's no traffic, there's probably like a bloody tour bus or something. Going slowly here, because the last time I came along here there was a bullock in the middle of the road. They're up in the field now. That's generally a good place for them. Right, this is my favourite bit. And I'll just stop. Because look at it. Somehow to me, and normally I come here in May, that's when it's most beautiful. It's just kind of, I don't know. It's the trees and the greenery on the floor and everything. I just really like it. I think the Brough likes it because it wouldn't let me find a gear. Right, my visor is up. Okay, what's the most picturesque quarter mile of road you know? And you're all over the world, so it's just beautiful. It's the sort of place you imagine having a picnic with the love of your life when you were youngsters. Maybe that's it. Okay. That's it, I told you there wasn't much to it. And now it's just normal, picturesque little English country lanes. I thought I might assemble all the riding footage I've got together. There'll be hours and hours of it. And if someone's trying to go to sleep, or they've got nothing better to do, maybe just have it whirring on the background. People would watch that. I don't know. What I have discovered making these films, filming them is the easy bit. It's literally you just, there's a bit of tinkering to get all the settings right, and the camera and things, but then you just like ride along. Talk a little bit, try and say something that people aren't going to whine about. There's quite good mountain biking in there. We're only doing 20 miles an hour. I think I'll chug along. Okay. I was kind of thinking if I'm going too low revs, you might not hear the engine. And I know some people just love to hear the engine. Please all of the people all of the time. I'm not pleasing any of the people any of the time. I may find out if you put comments in, or if you like it. I was used to kind of ignore that. People would say please like and blah blah blah, and kind of just lets it wash over you, and you don't. But if you've taken the time to spend a few minutes or half an hour watching someone's film, if they were showing it to you, you'd just thank them. The least I can do now is when I watch something that I enjoy is to click like. And if the content's really good, maybe I'll watch a couple and I'll subscribe. So then I'll get told when they come out rather than having to go to home in YouTube and kind of troll through loads of stuff that I don't want to watch. See, I'm still using that front brake after a lot of miles on. I think I'm going to give it a name. Not here, but I'll tell you about giving it a name. So its previous owner was Mr. Tate, and he had it for a long, long time. He had it maybe for longer than I've been alive, or not far off it. So I think it had 3 owners before, but Mr. Tate's definitely the man who should be considered its owner. And it's an 80, it's an SS80. So I think maybe it should be called Tatey. Tate's 80, Tatey. Kind of Tatey, it's a bit informal. And that's what you'd call one of your mates that you've known for decades, isn't it? Hello Tatey, how are you? You alright Tatey? Ah, no. You can imagine that. I think this is Tatey. Just come up with that. If it likes being called Tatey. It's more country pubs. Oh, another country pub. There's a lot of country pubs in England. Very idyllic little school. And those little Herberts running around the place. There's a duck pond here. Brought my dog here once when we were coming back from somewhere. Just let him sit out of the car for a little while. There were ducks there. And after we left there was one less duck. The dog was a German wirehead pointer. Which, if you ever had one of those, you will understand. When councils do that. It's probably designed for cyclists. Oh, he's moving. Let's take you for a ride on this in the dark. See what our parents, grandparents put up with. Grandparents maybe, if you're a youngster. We're in the county of Hampshire, which is southern England. Crossing into the county of West Sussex. But there's a lot of terrain like this. Not sure what my camera's going to make of this. Sorry. Just got a fly going in my mouth. I just wanted to look up there. I'll be home in less than half an hour. I'm looking forward to a pot of tea. Maybe a icy cold Coke. There we go. I seem to remember this being a potholed hell down here. The dappling makes the camouflage of the potholes almost perfect. Someone's entrance. Probably work out where we are now. Be poring over old surname maps trying to work out where the hell we are. Advanced ignition. Had it a bit retarded because I've been just tootling along. Excitable chap come up behind me in a red BMW car. I understand that. He was probably hoping to have a bit of a blat along here. There's some old bloke in the way. Oh, well, that old. An old bloke. How old are you before you become an old bloke? Grey hair. Not some of it's grey. There's an old bloke and an old boy. Old boy, to be an old boy, I think you've got to be in your 70s to be an old boy. What do you reckon? The thoughts in the comments section. And here's a little junction. People seem to take their life in their hands when they pull out of. So, gently round there. If that works. For it'd be a tiny image of us, man and machine in perfect harmony in that round farm mirror. Right, we're between Petersfield and South Harting. And again, for those that need to know, this road has no speed cameras. Some good mountain biking up through there as well, up onto the top. Oh, we seem to have left Mr. BMW behind. How fast are we doing? Copper Beeches. The Sherlock Holmes Copper Beeches, that's over near Winchester. Enjoying the ride. Mr. BMW's back. Well, I didn't pull over to then go blasting past if you wanted. That is the South Downs, which is the original highway. And it's a highway because it's a way and it's high, and that is the truth of where it comes from. Because thousands of years ago, unless your trackway, your way, was up high, it would become a boggy, flooded hellhole in the winter. Especially once a few horses had been down it, or cattle. That's still shut. Okay. It's a very nice little post office there. But no, I'm not going meandering off into the 101 best post offices. But it's like a really nice, friendly little post office with all sorts of nice little cakes and nibbly things as well. Got lent or had a go on a Vincent Rapide, and unfortunately the ride ended just there. Then it spluttered to a halt. Carry on down the little lanes. South Downwards Way runs pretty much along the top, and you can walk it or mountain bike it. Or some people use normal bicycles, gravel bikes, which is obviously the latest trendy thing. You notice that kind of whole kind of off-roady thing is kind of the trend in motorbikes, adventure bikes. People who buy bikes as if they're going to, like, I don't know, ride across Africa or something, but probably don't. And then you've got people buying gravel bikes, like a racing road bicycle, but with kind of little grippy knobbly tyres on it, and probably a little bit of a change in geometry. But again, those bikes have got absolutely no suspension whatsoever. So I'd imagine riding one of those along there is going to be a battering experience. There you go, that's what you want, your saddlebag, probably your brewing up kit. And then the whole thing with cars as well. Everybody wants a car that looks like it's an off-road car. Yet no one takes them off-road. That VFR. Good bit of kit, VFRs. What did I get to with my ramblings? Yeah, cars. Maybe some deep psychological, there we go with that one. Psychological need for humanity to explore the wilds, and that's why everyone's buying bicycles, motorbikes and cars that kind of indicate that you might. I think that's what it is. I know there was like a trend in motorcycling, isn't there? There's retro bikes, maybe not quite so much now. There used to be super sport bikes for a long time. Round the corner here we'll face a house. I think it's a very picturesque house. Pause at that. Is that a picturesque house? I think so. It's a very good pub here as well. Three Horseshoes. It's run by Sue. Go into gear that time. Maybe it's me, maybe I'm just tired. Definitely one of the things to think about when you're riding a motorbike, isn't it? Everyone thinks of safety, wearing body armour, and this Rukka stuff's got like the most advanced body armour in the most enormous size you've ever seen. The best thing to do is to avoid having the accident in the first place. And when you're a youngster you tend to do stupid things because you aren't experienced, and then you're less and less likely to get knocked off as you get older, and then it tends to be complacency. So things like getting tired and thinking you're invulnerable. It's good to remind yourself you're not. All of this together as one long film. Just like, who on earth is going to watch all of this? I probably would actually. It was like someone going for like a 5-hour ride on something interesting down roads that I was either familiar with or were completely different to me. I suppose there is an audience for it. Well, it's easy enough to do. Find out. Oh, I've got my visor down, the audio should be better. Now, one of the things I liked doing when I was a youngster was jumping humpback bridges. But I won't be doing that. There are many reasons. This is where I came and practiced sprint starts on my 1914 Triumph. You can see the road's a good quarter mile long, and in 2012 I decided I should attempt to set an outright world record for pre-1915 motorcycles, so pre-World War I motorcycles. and that's where I practiced my sprint starts and sorting out the gearing. There was only a single speed, there's no gears in it, it's just got a pulley and a belt, but you can change the diameter of the pulley to change your gearing. And anyway, I did go to Brighton Speed Trials, probably the oldest venue in the world for speed events. The first event was in 1905 when the great Henry Sissack set a world record. And so in 2012, I took my Triumph there and set a world record. And how fast does a veteran Triumph go, you ask me? Well, when you've got a fixed single gear, you've got to be able to push it off the line and start it, and then it's got to be long enough for you to try and stretch it out and see how fast you can go. And those two things are a bit of a compromise together. So I did the quarter mile in, I'll put it at the bottom, and my maximum speed, or my speed as I crossed the line actually, was 47, and I had to throttle off before I got to the end of the quarter. So I'd kind of reached the maximum revs I wanted to rev a 100-year-old engine to. So I think with a slightly change of gearing, it definitely would have topped 50 miles an hour in a quarter mile, which I know most of you are now sniggering about. But I thought it was quite good. Well, I'm definitely thinking about a cup of tea now. If I was really hot, if this venting in this jacket wasn't doing a good job, I'd probably be thinking about icy cold things. But as I'm only kind of warm, I'm thinking about tea. Yeah, that's something that should be in reviews, isn't it? It stayed so cool, we only needed a pot of tea. Right, this is the A272, whereas if you've got a superbike, you head here and hoon up and down. We used to, until the average speed camera was put up. How do you start one of these? What are you doing around this side? Is there some tickling taking place?
Yes, yeah, so I put both oil feed pipes have been turned on.
I have to turn them on and off.
Primed it briefly with that.
Okay.
Put a little bit of oil down. Yeah, just one little, little sort of release.
Okay, like a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, I've done that.
See the oil dripping in there.
Yeah. Put the fuel on.
Yeah.
Tickle the carb.
Yeah.
Build it up. Bit of advance.
Yeah.
Roll through once. And then we start kicking and open.
Oh, it's close. Well, here we are, and I haven't stopped for a photo, I've stopped for a small breakdown. The rear head gasket has blown on it, which apparently is not uncommon on these, and whilst I do have one in the toolkit, and I just chatted to a guy in the club, Howard, who suggested I could swap the head gasket at the roadside, which would be a first for me. But looking at it, I have to take the tank off and doing this you really want to use a socket set rather than open-ended spanners. So the get you home fix is to take the plug out from the rear cylinder, which has got the blown gasket, and ride it home as a 500 single, obviously very, very gently, and then I can swap the head gasket over tomorrow in my workshop. So I will, you can see it's blown properly, so I'll let it cool down and then see if I get home. If there's me smugly in the workshop with the head off, you'll know it's worked, or there'll be me with a truck with flashing lights going home by the truck of shame.